The headline of this press conference is what for you with regards to news and notes?
Salty Sark. It's not news and notes worthy, but there wasn't a lot of newsworthy nuggets. CJ Baxter was back at practice today, so that's the kind of the biggest noteworthy thing. You know, Sark talked a lot about, hey, they had a lot of things they need to clean up. Everybody's been talking about Quinn Ewers and the deep ball, and he said, hey, it wasn't all on Quinn. There were missed assignments in the blocking game. Routes weren't run properly sometimes, so he kind of spread some of that blame out. But the thing I'll remember about this press conference, guys, is Sark was pretty testy a couple different times, and including with our own Anwar Richardson.
Yeah, so tell us what happened with the Anwar stuff.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, man, you just never know sometimes like what's gonna set these coaches off, and not just Sark. I mean, you see it, Saban does it seems like weekly, but Anwar asked a question about if he approaches this game any differently than any other game, being that it's Bama, you know, versus a game against Rice or whoever, Wyoming. But he said, hey, Jeff Banks said, and I'm assuming he meant like whatever in fall camp, Jeff Banks said that they don't approach it differently, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about that? And Sark's like, well, you asking me or you asking Jeff Banks' answer? And Sark's like, Anwar just said, no, I'm asking you. And they just went back and forth, and Almar's like, I'm asking you for your opinion. Do you treat this game differently? And Sark's like, well, you're asking about Jeff Banks or you're asking me? And then finally Sark's like, well, what's the question? And so Anwar, they said, how do you approach this game differently? It was a little interesting little back and forth. And I'll give Anwar credit. He didn't back down. Anwar was kind of pissed. You could tell. And he's like, no, I'm asking you. He kind of gave it back to Sark. So ruffled some feathers for sure. So.
God, that coach sensitivity,
so funny, man.
Dude, it's a stressful week. I get it, but I was not expecting that.
I think in a weird way, Chad, his answer literally revealed the answer without him consciously knowing that it was revealing the answer.
A little bit. You know, last week I was on with y'all, and Chad, you and I were talking about like Sark was just kind of calm and loosey-goosey, right? Well, there was definitely an edge to Sark today. So if we're reading body language and that kind of thing, there's definitely a different mindset this week.
Yeah, it's just a different thing. You know, I remember we used to get on Mac Brown when he tried to give you the OU game is just like any other game. We treat it like yeah, sure you do. So it is a matter of fighting that human nature on both sides of it. And you can imagine there's a little more edge. I mean, fellas, I'm sure y'all saw it last night. Halftime of LSU and Florida State. Who did they interview? Steve Sarkisian. He was already talking about the matchup, talking about being an assistant, and Saban is 28-2 against the assistants. All the stuff that's going to pile up this week, it's huge. It is a matter of figuring out how to make it a bigger deal. Right? Like it just is. You can't go to like a concert of a band that's got one album and the Stones in the same week and go, I got two concerts. No, you don't. You mean you do, but it's two different things. So this is the measuring stick of his season. And it sounds like he knows it already. And you know what? He's kind of channeling Saban there. Sounds like he just made something up. Man. He made something up to get mad at. Saban would have done the exact same thing, Jason. Exactly.
I thought, you know what, Chad, you and I are on the same wavelength because Saban, sometimes I think Saban, and I feel very confident. I think his stuff is calculated. When he gets testy and goes after the media, it's almost like, you know, just a way to motivate his team or, hey, you guys are overlooking that opponent, and I'm going to go off on this reporter so that my team can see it and see that there's an edge. I kind of felt that way about Sark today. I was like, I wonder how much of this was calculated because, listen, I mean, he said, you know, they played well last week, okay, in spots. But he said there's a lot of errors, a lot of things they need to clean up. He said they need to be way more physical at the line of scrimmage on offense. I did wonder, like, how much of this was almost like calculated feisty Sark, like maybe he hopes it'll carry over to his team. I'm not sure, but you and I had the same kind of thought process there.
Yeah, I wonder if from Anwar's perspective, not having heard the whole thing, but kind of having it somewhat explained, it sounded like Anwar was providing context to the question, and that I asked this question of Banks, and he gave kind of a surprising answer. I'm curious about what your thoughts are. Do you view it the same way? So I think he's giving context, and I wonder if Sarkisian thought at the very beginning of the press conference for Alabama, you're trying to set me up with a gotcha moment. I don't
Yeah.
think it was a gotcha moment.
Yeah, I don't see how he could have taken it as a gotcha
Yeah, he
moment.
almost it's almost like he took it like Anwar said, I asked Jeff Banks if he watches porn. He says he does, and you guys do in the coach's room. Coach, your thoughts? I mean, like he thought he was really getting trapped into something. He can take that either way. If he says, hey, Jeff Banks says you guys treat this like any other week, Sark could have said anything there. He could have said, we try to, but it's tough. Obviously, this is Bama. We try to go through our process, but clearly it's a different game.
Well,
That's
if he echoes Banks, it's the headline of the press conference,
right,
and it gets used as bulletin board material, if you will.
You can
right?
use that. There's a coach speak way to do that, Catch, and he kind of did later in the press conference. Someone asked him about if they're going to do anything differently in terms of their preparation, and he answered. He said, "Well, he goes, no, we're going to basically do things the way we've always done them." He goes, "I feel like every time we go into road environments, we come out prepared to play. We need to finish those games better, but it's not that we start slowly or our preparation isn't there." So there's a coach speak way to answer that. I don't know. I didn't see it as a gotcha moment at all.
I don't either. I'm just saying from his perspective, he may have gone into the press conference today thinking, no matter what you do, don't say anything stupid. Don't give Alabama something where maybe because he knows that Saban will use that as like, this is what they're saying about and this kind of thing. I just wonder if he came in on edge thinking, don't take the bait if there's any bait out there. And maybe he weirdly thought Anwar was feeding him bait to walk into that thing. I don't know.
He was extremely respectful of Nick Saban, which he always has been. He was last year. And he said Nick Saban was one of his two mentors, Pete Carroll being the other. So he's highly, highly respectful of Nick Saban, as you would expect. So I don't think there was anything in this press conference remotely that would be bulletin board material.
So outside of those things, Jason, obviously great news on CJ Baxter. If I'm a Texas fan, that's the first thing I'd love to hear, that he's back at practice. So anything else on the injury front that jumped out, or is that still pretty good news headed to Tuscaloosa? And then was there anything else for you that was mentioned that's noteworthy right now?
Yeah, nothing even discussed on injuries other than Baxter. So that tells me they're pretty healthy, right? Yeah. As they were last week. The biggest thing that I think I will take away from it is I don't get the impression that he was happy at all with their physicality on defense. Yes, he said we swarmed to the football, we populated the ball, did a lot of things well on defense, but their physicality up front on offense, you could tell Sark was not happy with it. He said Christian Jones played pretty well, and that was the only offensive lineman he mentioned. He didn't mention any other one. He said there's a lot of things they need to clean up in terms of missed assignments and their physicality. So I think that is going to be, a point of focus this week. Sark, he does it every week. He said, hey, we got to stay in the moment and be focused on today and not worry about Saturday. Let's focus on today's practice today, and we'll worry about tomorrow. He just said, hey, we're trying to keep the guys focused on their task at hand today, but they did have a good practice today, he felt like, in terms of their meetings and just kind of their walkthrough practice this morning. He felt like it was a very productive practice, but he did make mention a couple times they've got to be more physical up front on offense. So I think this offensive line is going to be under a microscope all week.
Interesting that we could live in a world where Christian Jones gets the shout out as boy, he's come a long way, Jason, that, people used to beg him to be pulled from the lineup. And here we are going into the Alabama game, and he's the only offensive lineman that Sarkisian the week of wanted to give shine to. It's a weird, funny little ironic world that we live in.
I'll tell you one other thing that I should mention. I found it interesting. He was asked about Jalen Milroe, and me being a recruiting guy, I thought it was interesting. Sark recruited Milroe at Alabama, and I thought it was a good question. Someone asked, like, hey, do you ever think, Sark, about how these quarterbacks are so intertwined, or almost? I mean, you think about, remember, Catch, Milroe was committed to Texas. Texas gets Quinn Ewers to commit, the class behind him. Milroe then decommits and flips to Alabama. Then Ewers, of course, goes to Ohio State, and now Ewers is back in Austin. And so these were two Texas commitments at one time that both ended up decommitting, and now one of them is back at Texas, one's at Alabama, and they're going to face off.
A very sliding doors moment.
Yeah, it's kind of, I always say it's kind of weirdly like incestual the way quarterback recruiting and
Yeah.
recruiting one domino can affect so many others. But it's going to be pretty interesting to see Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers match up, and that's an interesting storyline. Who got the best of that bargain? We'll find out Saturday night.
Jason, I'm good. If there's nothing else, there's nothing else. I'll let you get back to work. Chad, you got any other questions?
No, I'm good. I just wish somebody had been there to be a referee between Anwar and Sark. Maybe we need to assign someone to that job. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. We'll talk soon. Take care.